Hello, everybody, and welcome to the rugby discussion. Today, we are going to be talking about sexual equality or sexual harassment in rugby journalism. And I have Kaitlin with me today. How are you doing, Kaitlin?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
All kicked off because I did a piece a couple of weeks back called Media Hypocrisy. And Kaitlin came back and said, yep, it's around about sexual equality. And I was like, well, this one isn't, but hey, since you've mentioned it, I think this is something we need to have a chat about. Equality and inclusion is something we've seen a lot being talked about. We've seen players wearing coloured laces and things like that. And last week, I had a chat with two guys who are rugby fans and journalists who happen to be in wheelchairs about their experiences. And today we're continuing the theme and talking with Kaitlin about gender inclusivity. So how does an American get into rugby journalism or rugby writing?
Well, I've always been interested in writing from the time I could remember. I wanted to be a writer. So actually the media aspect was from birth. But my best friend was from England. So I did already, from the time I met her, which was when I was 4 years old, have a bit of an introduction to rugby. Her father is a huge Harlequins fan. I always knew what the sport was, but I never actually took up an interest in watching it because, you know, I'm an American. They don't have rugby on TV. What's the point? But I studied English in college, and in my junior year, I went abroad to London. So, of course, I had more up close and personal views of rugby. I lived with someone who was a huge fan of rugby, but I also befriended the rugby team of my university, which was King's College London, while I was abroad. We were at a Super Bowl tournament viewing, if you will, and they convinced me that rugby is a much better sport than football, and if I want to see a real sport, a real man's sport, I should go to their rugby games. So they sold me, I went to the match, and I immediately fell in love. And from then on, I just was watching rugby all the time when I was abroad. So, of course, as devastated as I was, you know, I didn't want to stop watching rugby when I came back to America. It infuriated me that we do, in fact, have a program, but no one's talking about it. Now, what year was this? This was 2015, so it wasn't too long ago. That I was working at Sports Illustrated upon coming back from abroad. And I would get into all these debates with the editor-in-chief of the publication saying, you know, rugby is the next sport in America. It's truly growing. Look at this. Look at all the athletes that are becoming rugby players. It's going to be in the Olympics. This is something that you need to get on top of. And the former editor-in-chief of the publication said, we're never going to cover rugby because it's never going to be something Americans want to read about. We don't have the audience for it. So there's no reason for us to even write an article about it. But finally, I convinced the head of the Olympics section to allow me to write a piece about the USA Sevens team, about Carla Niles, Madison Hughes, Mike Friday, and sort of a general introduction to how rugby was on the rise, a sleeping giant in the United States. So I suppose that kind of launched me into the rugby media. And sort of from then on, I've certainly continued to remind people that I have written that article, but I've tried to just develop relationships, try to develop a media relationship when I can, but expand my presence. Someone called me an influencer the other day, not just a journalist, and I guess that's what I am.
Yeah, I know, it's right, and that's terminology we're getting more and more. I mean, we see Tony calling himself a rugby change agent in the States, and it's becoming much more alive on social media and a lot more much more coverage and well, I guess Doug's antics have also helped to raise its profile somewhat. So obviously you're the only person at Sports Illustrated wanting to write about rugby. So what kind of barriers were all the barriers there just around the sport, or were there other barriers there to getting to expanding and doing more stuff with them?
I was writing, but I was a print intern, and it is true that in more standard sports journalism forms in the United States, it's always a gender hierarchy. And there definitely are fewer female writers and editors.
Cool. So I guess we were just talking about the male hierarchy in general American sports that you see over there, and obviously I guess you experienced at Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just to take it to the general American public in terms of sports media, not just limiting it to Sports Illustrated. In order to be a woman in sports, for example, I don't think anyone would deny this. What you think of when you think of a female journalist is someone who's on TV, and you can narrow them down to typically the hot sideline reporter. You know, a lot of people, as a joke on Twitter, will say, "Oh, I'm the Erin Andrews of USA Rugby." And Erin Andrews, though very talented, she's also known for being a very attractive female sideline reporter. So it's sort of, there's that automatic sexism with being a woman in that field. You have to be attractive or no one's going to pay attention to you. It doesn't really matter what content you're giving. And women sort of, when they have those sideline roles, they aren't really asked to provide much actual insight or much analysis, anything of depth to the conversation. They're merely asking, so how did you feel about that? Or this is what I've been told by the coach, rather than providing their own connection to what's going on. So I think automatically you can see there's an unlevel playing field with already established cultures.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that we've seen that role in rugby as well. We've seen that, it's Alistair Eakin, what's the name? I've got blank, over in the UK doing it. And we saw Fox Sports try a new invention where they had a female reporter run on the pitch after a player scored a try and interview him as the conversion was happening, which was absolutely crazy. But so I guess we are seeing that kind of role. Over here in New Zealand, it's a bit different, I think, in the fact that there is, we do have that role, but it's taken up by someone who is an ex-Blackburn, and she also does rugby commentary as well. So it's over here, I think we are seeing that as well. Outside of that, though, if we look at things like Rugby World, their assistant editor is female. I think they have 2 females on their podcast who are writers for their publication. We've got Georgia Robinson at the Sydney Morning Herald. So we are seeing it kind of, it's coming through. It is, but it has been a male-dominated area, just like it has been in the States, I think.
Exactly. For example, MLB, Major League Baseball, Jess Mendoza, former professional softball player for the United States, I believe she was an Olympian even, she actually is now a broadcaster for MLB games. And the problem is that even though she's doing a phenomenal job by being a woman breaking into this previously old boys club of a sport, she's actually receiving a lot of criticism, both from males and females, because this idea of having a woman do Sunday Night Baseball is just shocking and seems completely wrong. So we're still a work in progress, despite the fact that it's the 21st century. It's a long road, and just being there, even though it's an accomplishment for women, it's still, there's a lot to deal with.
I agree. And one of the things that I heard in business is it's all good and well having a female on the board of a company, but until you have 2, you don't actually, statistically, the company doesn't actually have any different approach to gender equality within its organization. So it's all good and well having one person who makes it as an exception, but there has to be a team of people making it. Otherwise, it doesn't trickle down, and people just see it as an exception rather than as something that people can do. So, yeah. So, and I know you're starting up a rugby podcast soon, but have you found that barriers into getting into other writing gigs? Because at the moment, I know you're doing some marketing pieces as well. You're not just purely writing at the moment.
Yes. So in the past, I initially started off writing my Sports Illustrated piece, and from then on, that sort of got me a little bit of attention along the way. People could see that I was a talented and published writer, and they wanted me to write for their sites. So while I do continue to get offers to write pieces, and people claim that they want me to contribute to their site, I have found when it comes to giving me pieces of substance, if you will, there's a lot of resistance towards doing that. For example, I will not name names of any publication other than Sports Illustrated, of course, but I was for a brief time, I was a contributor, writer, what have you, for a popular rugby publication in the United States. And because I was the only female on the very small staff, it was automatically assumed that I was going to be writing the women's rugby articles and that I was going to be exclusively college women's rugby. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a exclusively college and exclusively women's writer. But if you look at what my experience in rugby is, it's neither college nor women's rugby. I would love to be able to be an advocate for women's rugby. I feel it doesn't get enough coverage, but that's just not my expertise, and I would never want to write about something I'm not comfortable writing about. However, it was automatically assumed, and I felt that I was already put into that box of being the young woman going to be covering women's rugby. So that was sort of my initial start towards barriers. But then I started to realize the more players began to follow me on social media accounts, the closer I became with players, I was having a harder time actually pitching articles of substance. In January of this year, Alex Corbicero, who we all know, NBC Rugby, Northampton Saints, etc., he approached me to write an interview about him. So we met up in the city, and I'm still looking to publish that on, I will say, This Is American Rugby, because that's still something that we're working on together. But I pitched this story to multiple established rugby sites, and I was turned down because they wanted a male writer to write it. I was told that they had upcoming in the future, they had thoughts of XYZ writing that article. And it was presented to me in such a rude email. It wasn't even a thank you for passing this along, good luck, or like, this sounds interesting. It was just a no. And at that point, and these are the websites that I already had a rapport with, so I was shocked that this is the treatment that I was receiving. And that sort of kind of made it harder for me to even work on that piece that I was doing. It made it harder for me to continue to pitch stories because I was receiving such backlash. And at that point, I was either receiving no responses or receiving negative responses. And at that point, my options were either create my own website from scratch where I can write about whatever I want while I have a full-time job, or just accept that for some reason, this was going to be a hard moment for me and I needed to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, I'm not a professional journalist because I do all this in my spare time, which I have quite a lot of as I'm unemployed at the moment. But breaking in and getting a paid gig is hard enough. To have your own site and to publicize it and to actually get anyone to read it does take a lot of work, and to have to start there is definitely a hard route. I think you're better off trying, if you can, to find an established website you can work with. But I think you see a lot of those who will take it and not give you any compensation for it. Anything you're like, well, hang on, why am I giving you content for free when, especially yourself, has been in professional organizations and have a track record as well, which is definitely unfair. So those barriers there. Now, go on.
No, what I was going to say in addition to that is people know, whether it was because of the work that I did with Northeast Academy, a development program in the Northeast, or just my involvement on social media, my following of players, them following me, etc. I have quite a plethora of rugby players and coaches at all different levels that I talk to either on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or just I'm in close communication with. So I'm able to provide information to people if they want to, have interviews with these players or coaches, if they want to learn more. I like to see myself as a resource and sort of as a publicist, if you will, for different organizations, for different players and coaches, etc. And people would sort of not trust information that I gave, or sort of they would disregard information that I gave, hints that I gave about what might happen or ideas, and instead, worship male, perhaps less knowledgeable people in the field just because, they were, I will say, just because they were a man. I was providing concrete information compared to ideas, and I felt a lot of the times when I was privately DMing, direct messaging people with, actual factual information or trying to set up an interview, everything would have been perfect, but then it was constantly just ignored. Another thing is I don't want to jump necessarily to this subject yet, But it came a point too where I wasn't just seen as like stupid because I'm female, but also seen as more of taken less seriously because I was sexualized by being a female. And I mean that because I was told that I would certainly be able to contribute to this website that USA Rugby sanctions. You know, they needed writers. They needed, of course, writers to cover women's rugby. And at that point, I was so desperate because of this situation that, of course, I jumped at this opportunity to be able to write for something that USA Rugby was supporting. But every time I tried to bring up these pieces that I was told I'd be able to write, every time I talked or texted to talk about these pieces, conversations were constantly turned to me visiting this editor, me, you know, how the way that I looked, you know, things that were more flirtatious and inappropriate rather than the professional manner for why I was actually messaging. So I felt taken advantage of in that sense.
Yeah, and that's this is we're into an area which I just get flabbergasted by. To be honest, there was a good article that came out, I think, last year by a female sports journalist who went through a whole bunch of the advances or things she had received, both from people within the company and also for people online, not within the company, sorry, within the industry. And I remember one quote, someone coming back saying, yeah, there used to be a male journalist, I think it was in Australia, who would watch pornography within the actual the press box, which just blows my mind as to how that can be considered acceptable in any kind of way or place. So yeah, especially when we're talking about written media, how someone looks is totally irrelevant. If you're on camera, there is clearly you need to be smart and get dressed up. You know, I put my hat on every time, but it's so it is slightly different there. But it's about smartness and about appropriate attire. It's not about necessarily how you look, really. But I can understand why someone would want to meet you before they put you on camera. But for a written piece, it's totally irrelevant, and that just is mad. So okay, so you've had people say that they need to meet you and check you out before actually publishing your pieces.
Well, it was actually even more than that. It was that this person wanted me to visit them and spend time with them and be in an intimate relationship with them. And pieces that I was supposed to be writing, or you know, the pitches that I wanted to make were just like, oh, we can talk about that another time. You know, I was never even discussing anything professional, and I ultimately never contributed anything professional.
Jeez, that's nuts. Anything else in the industry, or do you want to move on to the social media side of things?
Yeah, no, keep moving on to the social media side of things. That brings up a whole different issue.
Well, I guess on the social media side of things, there's two sides to it. One is people in the industry, as you say, you've got a lot of people who follow you, who are part of that. So obviously they can contact you and say, hey, I'll do this for you, but hey, you need to come and do this. And then you've also got the public who will come back and suggest things, I suppose. Now you've got the support. I mean, let's just make sure that it's kind of a little bit of balance here. We do have people who do support you, help and do follow you and talk about rugby with you a lot. But what's some of the sort of negative side of things or comments you've had? If you want to, I don't know which way you want to start first, with people in rugby, or if you want to talk about the sort of public first.
I guess I'll start with in a way, a disclaimer that by no means am I suggesting that I have never received any support from anyone in the rugby community or the rugby media, and I'm by no means painting the entire rugby community as being bad men and women. You know, that is completely far from the truth. I mean, just to name a few names, I mean, Paul Holmes, Tony Ridnell, I mean, Matt McCarthy, they've always been extremely supportive of me and they're from all different angles of the USA Rugby community. So
some of those, so people who don't know, Tony is an ex-USA Eagle, has his own blog site, and calls himself, is looking at trying to make positive change within rugby. Matt McCarthy is the Rugby Wrap-Up and the Two Mats, I think it is, website as well, who publish quite a lot of stuff and do a lot of videos. The other name I must admit I didn't recognise from.
So Paul Holmes, he is one of the founders of Tiger Academy. Everyone should definitely look them up and follow them on Twitter and Facebook and all social media, because they're definitely getting a lot of exciting news coming on their end. And more to report on that at another time. I don't want to say anything completely unofficial. But I mean, even relationships I've had with players and coaches from across the country. You know, I'm actually very close with the Austin Huns in Texas, from their general manager to their head coach, their players. I'm very much in contact with them, and I'm sort of seen as being an ambassador for the program in New York City, because I'm in New York and they're in Texas. So I suppose that is what I do want to say, that by no means am I painting the entire community as being sexist, as being unfair, as being selfish. It's not that way. And I truly believe that USA Rugby, you know, they have a great group of leaders right now. Dan Payne, he's doing excellent work. Blaine Scully, you know, I can't say I'm proud of them, because that doesn't seem like the right word, but I'm very supportive with what they're doing. But I will say that it's hard for people who have not experienced harassment online, or do not, say, as a male, experience the same harassment online. It is definitely hard for people to believe that harassment actually occurs. A lot of things happened behind closed doors that have happened to me, and I mean this more metaphorically, because it's all been online. But certainly that has happened, and when I've tried to speak about it, I've been told to stop because I'm making organizations look bad. And I'm in a male sport, so I should learn to just deal with it and move on.
And that's crazy. I used to work in investment banking in the IT, not in the front office, but you had a lot of that was going on back in the 80s, and they have had $1 million settlements all over the shop, dealing with this kind of stuff. It's amazing that we're now sort of 30 odd years after that, and we're still seeing the similar sort of things happening. And I must admit, to a certain degree, I mean, we're seeing that in New Zealand as well. So the last year, or for the past couple of years, there's a thing called Monday Madness, where after the end of the season, the players go out and just get drunk and do silly things. But this is basically essentially a work event. And for the last 2 years, at least, the Chiefs on their Monday Madness have had a stripper at the end of their work event. Now that is just crazy to me, coming from the corporate world where I have, that any suggestion of that basically would get you fired for doing that. And yet they considered that was acceptable, and it wasn't unacceptable until she complained that they went further than they should do. So that kind of behavior automatically excludes any sort of any of the female backroom staff from attending, or they just have to put up with it, as you say, which is just, to me, yeah, I just can't believe it, having come from the world I come from, that kind of stuff still goes on.
Yeah. Now, you see, I kind of keep to myself, because Tony and I talk quite frequently about what's going on, because he tries to be a voice for me where I can't, and that's because people won't let me, if you will. I've somewhat kept a running list of incidents that I have faced. I don't name any names because I don't want Tony to know, and I don't want them to be fully reported as people, because I'm not looking to punish anyone. I'm merely looking to sort of show an example of what is actually occurring. Because I think, you know, like if you look at any established program, whether that's a sports team or a sports franchise, whether that's, you know, just a business in general, you know, when it's terrible when established organizations like that have these issues. But what people don't understand is that USA Rugby, as huge of a fan base as it may have, it's still entirely growing. And while we are focusing on, you know, we're focusing on things that are important for the national teams, we're focusing on things that are important for establishing us as a united organization. But little things like this, you know, these are things that become national issues. They reach the law, they reach the government. You know, these are things that traumatize people. I've been traumatized in what has happened to me. And I mean, if I could, they range from extreme to not extreme, but would you like me to read a little bit of the list?
Yeah, because I've got to put it sounds like the list won't take a while to get through. So,
yeah.
Which would be...
Well, for starters, let me just say that this all happened on social media, because social media, as we all know, is a place where people can say what they want and they won't get caught. And despite some of the stupid things that were said to me, most of these were said to me on Snapchat, so that I didn't have the chance to actually take a picture or a screenshot of what was being said to me before it disappeared. So I no longer have screenshots of what people said to me, which is why I'm not naming names either. But I think one thing that people need to keep in mind is women don't lie about when they're being sexually harassed. I think that's one of the worst things that you could ever suggest to a woman, no matter what the case is, that she's lying, that she's exaggerating. I think if a woman is saying that she's being sexually harassed, that's something that needs to be listened, because we don't want that attention. So I guess to carry on, USA national team rugby players continue to DM me, including club players, asking when I'm visiting them, because they'll keep room for me in their bed. They say I'd look hot in their jersey, but hotter without it, and they ask for nudes. An extremely notable USA rugby national team player, one that the program has tried to develop a brand for, told me he would no longer support my work because I don't support him by sending him dirty pictures. He told me to call him daddy, told me we should have a baby, told me to send him nudes, and would tell me how aroused my pictures sent him, even if I wasn't trying, and would call me a tease when I wouldn't send him nudes to help him finish. Another USA national team player told me if I came to Vegas, he'd hook me up with a player on England's team because he knows that player wants to get laid. A college head coach at one of the top college rugby schools messaged me on Twitter for my Instagram handle and my Snapchat handle. After a few minutes, he offered to stream one of the college matches for me if I pay him back in dirty pictures. He continued to send me messages of himself touching himself, saying it would be our little secret, saying he was bored, saying he wanted entertainment, saying he was lonely. I also found out within the first few minutes of talking to him that he is engaged to be married, and his players, because of the school they go to, will likely be future USA Eagles. The coach for a successful club team asked me to travel to a different country with him, calls me sexy blondie, and I've never met him, and he's more than twice my age.
Wow.
Players I and the last is really just that players that I actually know quite well asked me to go into detail about what I was talking about so that they could mock me, tell their teammates about what was happening to me, and then message me that I was just asking for the attention because I think rugby players are hot, and this is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just, wow. Whilst I was expecting some things, I definitely wasn't expecting that level of that level of abuse.
And mind you, I'm 23, so I haven't been out in the field, if you will, for very long. I only really started picking up my Twitter over, say, the past 6 months. And also all of this has occurred in a very short period of time.
Wow, okay. We are, so we are talking very recent time as well.
We're talking as recent as a month ago, because a month ago is when I started just blocking people that would message me on any random post that I had, whether it was on Instagram or Twitter, and send me inappropriate DMs. Just because I post a photo of my face doesn't mean I'm sending it to you in a dirty way, but people would continue to make it inappropriate. So sort of that even happened a week ago, but daily I get inappropriate messages.
So sorry, daily you get inappropriate messages? Daily,
yes.
Wow. I mean, I've been on Twitter now for a couple of years. And let's be honest, I built up a decent following, and I've never had those any kind of messages along those kind of ways. And as you say, if you're not as a guy, because you never see it, you never experience it, it's hard to understand it. But it's something we need to get out there and talk about, so it does stop. It's never going to totally stop, but something to be happening on a daily basis is just crazy. And to be and to have to put up with that to try and further your career is say is nuts. I had heard, I mean, in the UK, the police are trying to prosecute people who do put abuse online, and I don't know how far that's going with any of this. And if it just doesn't sound like it's having any effect at all in controlling this kind of stuff.
And I guess what I want to interject by saying that I may seem fine and calm and collected now, but that's because I've sort of channeled my feelings about this situation into a more productive anger and more passion to actually do something about it rather than continue to be made a victim. For honestly, probably, I want to say several weeks, but it was probably more like several months. I was actually very depressed about what was happening to me. It was my dream for the longest time to sort of make a name for myself in rugby media and to be the face of young rugby media, if you will. And the more this was happening to me, the more I realized I was never going to be taken seriously in this industry. I didn't even have the emotion to be able to finish writing pieces that I was assigned. I was unable to focus at my day job because I was just paralyzed by what messages were coming on my phone. I just couldn't function.
Yeah, no, I don't see that kind of stuff has to have an impact on you. In real life, it's not just words on a screen. It is suggestions of stuff that people are going to do to you. And it's just, yeah. Apart from, saying I'm sorry if I'm trying to support you in any way, I really can't. I'm just not sure what to say around all this. But I guess the one thing I would say is that you can, but we can see people who have made it and have gone through this and do have good careers as female rugby journalists. So yes, just because some people are doing this kind of stuff, as you say, Tony's on your side, and other people are as well, that you can make it and you can be that authoritative voice. That's all I'm going to say. It's from that point of view, it definitely can happen. Just because some people are putting you down, it's not everyone that is going to do so. And I think it's thank you very much for coming on here and talking about this. I say it's something that we do need to get out there. It is obviously something that has to be painful. I've just from people just disagree with my point of view and saying it in a personal way upsets me sometimes on Twitter, and that's not anyone. That's not going in anywhere near this kind of level of stuff. And be able to channel it in a different way is got to be important. It is again. Hopefully, I would like to think it's a minority of people, but maybe it's not. The majority are silently reading and listening and enjoying the content. Maybe not always saying they enjoy it and going back saying so. Any other points you want to cover off before we?
Yeah, well, I suppose that I do want to say that, kind of just going off what I said, I am now trying to channel all these feelings and all these experiences into something that's more positive and productive for me, because I don't think it's right, and I've been told that it certainly isn't right for me to give up something that I love because of a bunch of idiots that just don't understand what's mature, what's appropriate, etc. So I won't give full details yet because nothing is entirely announced and official, but yes, there is a website and a podcast that's rebranding and relaunching, and I have been asked to be the podcast host. So I will, from my personal Twitter account at KAM3194, be tweeting about that shortly. And I'm going to be helping another rugby academy in the United States with some of their social media and just general communications. And who knows, maybe that website will come out. Maybe I will make a new website. I've joked about it with a friend, and maybe it'll happen. I definitely plan to get my Alex Corbacero piece up online, because now that I have this new fuel to do something productive, I'm no longer afraid to watch a rugby game or to actually write an article about rugby. So I'm back, and I'm feeling better than ever.
Fantastic. So, and for people, I'm going to cover off on all of this. So where can people find you and to give positive feedback? Obviously you mentioned, run through, so your Twitter account, you get Instagram, where else so let's just run through those so everyone knows how to get hold of you.
Yes, so I'm always on social media. So Twitter is my main outlet. That is, again, at KAM3194. There you can also find my Instagram handle, which is at Kaitlin, so that's KAITLIN_MCCABE. And I don't really use any other form just yet. Maybe I'll use more going forward. But yeah, you can follow me there, and more exciting news will be sent out on those platforms shortly.
So I encourage everyone who's watching, do follow Kaitlin for not only American rugby, but other rugby things, coverage, but also if you're interested in other rugby sports, she's often tweeting about whatever she's watching on those ones as well. And it's not just purely rugby. Obviously, you can follow me at DrivingMaul. On Twitter is the best place to get hold of me, but there's also my website, DrivingMaul.com, where you'll find all my videos and written pieces as well. So, Kaitlin, thank you so much for coming on. It's been enlightening and shocking for me, anyway, and it's taken a lot of courage from yourself. I can tell that, and yeah, well done. Keep going. You will make it.
Thank you.
So, thank you, everybody, and I will be back later on Periscope with my European Rugby Champions and Challenge Cup semi-final predictions. So catch me there later.